Hello, everyone. I'm Jan from ExPretio.
And I'm Leonardo Romero. I actually go by Trey. I am the Senior Director of Revenue Management at Amtrak. I oversee a division primarily responsible for Amtrak's long-haul service.
And I'm doing products, innovation. I also have the client team at ExPretio.
Okay, so before we jump into sort of the specific phases we wanted to talk about today, we thought we would start with at least a brief high-level overview of Amtrak's RMS journey. This RMS kind of revenue management system. Sorry, I'll try not to use too many acronyms. As this sort of timeline helps illustrate, it's been about a 2-year process. We started in winter and spring of 2021, primarily focused on sort of defining our need, understanding scope and definition. From there, we transitioned into RFP and vendor evaluation that summer, before final contract negotiation and contract award in fall of 2021. And again, we'll get into some specifics here.
And then we moved on to the implementation project, both the IT side and the business side, the onboarding, and we started, so after the part of the integration project, we did roll out the software on the first services at December 2022, and as of August, the entire network is actually managed as a new RMS. And now let's go look at what went bad, what went well, and key lessons that we got, and give you details about these steps. Okay.
All right, so the first phase we wanted to talk about is really the pre-RFP phase. In this phase, we're really concentrating on defining our need, understanding scope, and definition of system. However, really, and I'm sorry, I kind of lied to you here, we actually started about a month or two prior to this with really the formation of a super user group. And I want to emphasize that because I think it was key to our success during this phase and actually all future phases. The super user group was primarily comprised of really a broad representation of all internal departments that would be impacted by the new RMS. Including everything from end users to IT and whatnot. Now, while primarily comprised of end users, like I said, I think the other key to success here was the actual allocation of dedicated resources, and no better way to put it. These were really 2 analysts who had no other job responsibilities other than actually helping to basically evaluate the system, help define needs, provide business examples, and talk to the vendors throughout the process. And again, I just think that was sort of critical to our success.
I agree. We'll come back to that in the later phases. But from our perspective, we see a lot of requests for proposals out there. Some of them they're all different. Some of them go, well, these are the 350 requirements. These are the 800 requirements. And as a vendor, what we're trying to do always is to say, okay, what's the story behind this? They're asking this, but it's because there's some need somewhere. What is it? And I got to say that the result of the Amtrak process was interesting in the sense that it was not. Well, there were some requirements, but there's a lot of, okay, this is what our network looks like. These are the challenges that we have. And what do you think the impact of that is, and how can you help us? And that made it a lot easier for us to actually come up with a value proposition that we thought, okay, we're a good fit for this, and we can actually provide some value. And that was, I would see that was super fun to actually do.
Yeah. And again, I think that was a direct byproduct of the super user group. We really had been through this before. In truth, this was an RMS replacement. We kind of knew some of the traps of onboarding an RMS, and we felt that it was sort of critical, and we'll talk about this in the next slide, really just having dialogue around need, not necessarily scope.
Yeah, with even examples of we have this market that's highly elastic, this other one that overlaps, and here's what's going on. And I would say that was very different.
All right.
Yeah. The Amtrak network is very interesting.
All right. So really moving on to phase 2, really focusing on RFP, vendor evaluation, really sort of nuts and bolts, right? We had published the RFP, we started getting bids, we really started talking through with vendors. We found probably what was most critical to our success, again, here in this phase, was having open and candid dialogue. And again, not just statements of work, but really dialogue around the needs of the business. Amtrak, I don't know how familiar everybody is with Amtrak. We operate across about 34,000 kilometers of track. We serve about 500 cities geographically dispersed across 3,000 miles. We have products ranging from unreserved high-frequency service in California to high-speed in the Northeast and even leisure room products. So, kind of clustering all of that together was very difficult to find a single solution. And that variation required candid dialogue with our vendors.
Yeah. And this is one case where, well, for us, Amtrak is like several rail networks into one. And the nice thing was I was able to leverage our experience with different kind of operators. So that was actually also what drove the next parts of the project, where we had the integration project, but we actually run two phases and two tracks on that project. One was more IT, I would say, where we loaded the entire network at once and tried to figure out, okay, what are all the hiccups that are going to happen? Is it, time zones? Even though they were invented by train companies, there's still, things that but there's just examples, all sorts of the way that products are sold or exchanged or canceled, and to make sure that we had the right thing. The other side, we had this gradual onboarding of one route after the next so that we could handle the IT specificities, but also the business ones. Because once you set up a way of working, it's very difficult to change in the future. So it was critical for us that each of the routes, we were able to address the key business concerns for all of them. And
absolutely. Well, maybe I'll just speak briefly to the commercial side. During, again, this phase, which is really just around implementation. So contract had been awarded, we had really moved ahead with ExPretio, and we were looking at implementation. At least on the commercial side, we concentrated on three sort of phases. So the preparation and communication. Here we really focused on defining our vision, selling the benefits to the analysts to ease onboarding in the future phases, and really we also took a look at ourselves internally, the RM function specifically, and tried to understand what our role was in this sort of environment in a new RMS with the new partner. And what I mean by that is not just bucket controls and inventory management, but the broader sort of retailing responsibilities that, say, an RM analyst may have. So just sort of broadening the scope and understanding how it fits within the new system. Now from there, when we got to execution, Jan's absolutely right. We really sort of focused on sort of a phased implementation plan. Now, that benefited from us some, testing things. We didn't, blow up the whole system as things were sort of progressed. But the other benefit there, I think, from more of the commercial side was it allowed us to balance competing work priorities. So if you think about the timing of this onboarding, it was right in the middle of sort of a post-COVID recovery. Sorry, I should be careful to call it post-COVID, but demand started sort of raging back. We had what we call revenge travel. There was a lot of domestic interest in travel. So balancing both sort of day-to-day workload and management of RM functions with the onboarding of a new system, a phased implementation allowed us to avoid sort of burnout with analysts and ensure we had good retention. And again, that super user group that I would reference at the very beginning was sort of critical here because we had dedicated resources. Yeah. And then I think the third piece around integration is pretty critical too. Very early on in the process, after we had selected a vendor, we really focused on incorporating ExPretio's jargon into sort of our corporate culture and language to help smooth the adoption process. So everything from referring to things as journeys versus trips, and I mean just little things like that I think really sort of helped with the integration and prevented reversion. It was commented about earlier in some of the keynote speeches how rail is sort of sometimes entrenched and it takes a lot to sort of change. So we had learned from prior RMS implementations on how to at least internally manage change management, onboarding of new RMS systems, onboarding of new systems, and ensuring adoption. So
it's, again, I think that the super users were a great thing to have because in some cases we were discussing with different routes, but at the same time we had this one person or this one set of person who knew everything, so we could always sort of use them as I'd say as an interpreter of what was going on, and that was great. Yeah. I would say that's definitely a repeat. And now that I think, are we already there? Okay, so now in the future, yes, right, we are, now the network is fully there. Now we are evolving the Amtrak practice. Amtrak has like massive goals coming up.
Big goals, very aggressive goals.
And so it's how do we support that? How do we actually evolve the system and evolve the practice at Amtrak to actually roll out even more use of the RMS, because it's used right now, but there are different ways of doing ticks. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are some parts, for example, the parts in Virginia where we're actually running the forecast-based optimizer at fully, and we're looking to grow that into the rest of the network now. Now that everything is the same, everything is a system, so it's a lot easier to actually make those changes and try to change practices.
Absolutely. Well, and again, just from the corporate side, commercial side, looking ahead to the future, the one other thing that I think has been very, very helpful over the last, really since August, I know that's actually not very long because we just finished implementing it, but has really been having not really postmortems, but continuous touch points for the analysts, celebrating successes. It's allowed them to sort of have a chance to discuss with their peers best practices, observations, and it's really helped with sort of ongoing refinement and continuous improvement. And like Jan said, I think we're still in the early phases of that, but very excited about moving to forecast-based optimization and the like. So,
With that, that's pretty much it. So,
okay.
I don't know if you